back to the Insider Galaxy podcast. I am your host, Eric Hernandez, as always. 4-2 results, 1 against, 1 for the Galaxy. The 1 against was for the Portland Timbers, and the 1 for us was against the Vancouver Whitecaps. So we're going to recap those games. I know it's a little bit of a late episode here, but of course, we're going to talk about those games right now as the Galaxy get a not so fortunate result and a very much fortunate result over the past week. And of course, talk about this week. And of course, the Galaxy are on a bye. They don't have a game this week, actually. So everybody else in the league will play. The Galaxy will not, and they won't be back till next Wednesday against the Colorado Rapids, and another big week next week for them, as like I said, they take on the Colorado Rapids and as well as their final home match against Austin FC. So yeah, obviously there's some things to talk about, some Galaxy news and extension, some player updates. There's a lot of things that are happening around Galaxy Land, so obviously we'll get into those as well. So of course, once again, it is another episode where I am alone here. We almost had it, ladies and gentlemen. We almost had it. Alex was about to be on the show today. We were going to do an episode today as we're recording. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Yesterday I'd even messaged him. I was like, hey, you good to record tomorrow? Like, is it when I messaged him yesterday, I was like, are you good to record? He's like, yeah, like we're good to record. Like, he has a time in his schedule. I have time in my schedule, for today. And unfortunately, that was not the case. Texted him about an hour before. Apparently he has a sinus infection. So right now he is not feeling that great. So unfortunately we almost had him. We almost had Alex here. Just back on the episode. Point is, we almost had him back on here, but hopefully next week will be the week. We did talk about it. So hopefully next week will be the one where he joins on, but we'll have to think about that one as well and see what works for him. So I'm assuming maybe, as of right now, I am recording this on Thursday, September 26th here. So of course, maybe next Thursday might work for him. I don't know. I just got to talk to him, and maybe we might do an episode in between the Colorado and Austin game. But of course, I might talk about both anyways in this episode, but still though, yeah, we almost had him here, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, he was not able to join back in with us, but it's okay. Obviously, I'm pretty sure you guys are used to by now being here solo for the podcast, for the episode. So yeah, I mean, obviously I'm going to talk about everything that happened this week. I know it's a late episode. The reason why it was a late episode is one, obviously, I try to get Alex back on here. So hopefully, just have him here, maybe just do the podcast a little bit later, upload it later but it was going to be so he can be back on here. And then also just the Galaxy don't play this weekend. They don't play till Wednesday. They don't play till, what is that, October 1st, if I'm not mistaken, October 2nd against the Rapids. So obviously this might just be an episode just to just talking about the Galaxy, heading into the weekend. Although we don't have a game, you can have something Galaxy related over the weekend. So hopefully, I help you guys with that, with having some sort of Galaxy content and news or anything like that to help you during the weekend. Obviously, there's going to be still a lot of MLS games over the week. So yeah, I mean, obviously, hopefully this helps you with that. But there's a couple of games we do need to talk about. I'm not going to go really super in depth into them because they've already happened. I mean, the Portland game was already over a week ago, and then we're almost heading to a week for the Vancouver game. But let's start off with the Portland one because, like I mentioned, both results were 4-2. Portland, unfortunately, was a loss. So this one, of course, a midweek game going into Portland. Not going to be an easy matchup. Not going to be, an easy just game in general in the midweek going up into Portland. We know how Portland is. We know how the Pacific Northwest has treated us over the years. This was not going to be an easy one for the Galaxy, and clearly it wasn't. I mean, the Galaxy that day did not play well. 4-2. Portland gets on the board early. I believe it was in the 17th minute from Cabecita Rodriguez, so for Portland. And yeah, I mean, obviously it kind of just, spiraled from there. Evander gets a goal also in the first half. I believe he scored in the 40th. Gabriel Peck pulls one in before the half ends. Then, of course, Portland get another goal. Painso also gets another goal. And just ultimately, it was a little bit back and forth at times. but you can tell if you were watching the game that that was a game where we did not look good, and Portland was just absolutely, having their ways against us. It was not a good night for the Galaxy. Not a good night. When you look at the starting lineup as well, you had McCarthy in there. Your defense was the same. You had Yamane, you had Yoshida, Neal, Nelson. Midfield was different. Obviously, no Edwin Cerrillo for that game because of the yellow card accumulation. Um, he wasn't available. So you had Brugman, you had Mark Delgado, and you had Ricky Puig starting the midfield that we wanted to see for such a long time already, because we know how much that midfield had success, and we were hoping that that midfield was going to give us some success for that night. That was not the case that night. Obviously, the midfield that day was not that great, so which I'll get into in a bit. But of course, we had that going into the game, and then your offense, you had Miguel Berry, you had Joseph Paintstone, you had Gabriel Peck. So really, you just didn't have Joveljic, which, again, going into that game, I know a lot of people were, after that game, were kind of like, why did we start that way? Why did we, why was that the lineup that we decided to go with? It kind of made sense. I mean, it was a midweek game. You didn't want to put all your starters in there. And then you had some firepower coming off the bench. Obviously, you had Joveljic coming off the bench. You had Marco Reus, Diego Fagundes. I mean, there was going to be a lot of firepower to come off the bench, and hopefully, if we were down at some point, which we were, those guys would be able to help us, which it ultimately didn't really help us much. But still, though, when you look at that Portland game, it was really bad in terms of what the Galaxy played that day. It's not what you wanted to see after an LAFC game, after an El Trafico, where you won 4-2, which, by the way, 3 straight games with 4-2 results, 2-4, 1 against. Still, though, for Portland, I think it's just like, that's not what you wanted to see. You were hoping to see, I mean, it's not that there wasn't a fight from the Galaxy, but it definitely just, Portland was just a much better team that night, right? In terms of that. Like I mentioned before, the midfield, I think, was one of the biggest things. The midfield battle was lost in that game very, very early on. Gaston Brugman, someone that we've been wanting to see, excuse me for my phone. Gaston Brugman, someone that we've been wanting to see for such a long time already, come back and start and hopefully give us the Gaston Brugman that we wanted to see, or that we got from a bit of last season in 2022. Unfortunately, and I hate to say it for Gaston, for that, at least in terms of that game, I mean, boy, does it look rough for him. And I don't know if that he's going to be necessarily going to be starting anytime soon. I mean, that was a game where I think a lot of people had their eyes wide open. A game where a lot of people realized that was maybe a sign that Gaston Brugman probably wasn't going to be, maybe not be the same way that what he was before. I mean, he's still a valuable asset for the Galaxy. Obviously, Gaston is someone who's going to, give it all for the badge, likes being here, but at the end of the day, as a starter material, I think that's kind of slipped over him. And yeah, I mean, it was bad. It was bad from him. It was bad from Mark Delgado. I mean, he didn't look that great either in that game, which is unfortunate. I mean, again, still, I mean, Mark Delgado is still a valuable piece as well. I mean, it's not like he's been having a bad season or anything, but this performance wasn't good for him. And then you also had Ricky Puig, trying to do his best offensively, and it wasn't. We didn't do, I mean, we got 2 goals, but it's not like we were finishing everything. We weren't as clinical in that game, which is something that the offense did struggle. You look at the defense, obviously, which a lot of people were talking about the defense and how they really played that game. Everybody really pointed the finger at the defense, right, for all those goals, which I don't know if I could really point at everything from the defense for sure. Because, I mean, the defense, yes, I mean, were some of those preventable? Maybe you can argue that, but I think the problem with it is that we put ourselves in very bad positions for the defense to basically not be set enough to have those goals, stopped or prevented. And it was bad. Like, I mean, it was bad from a night defensively, but I don't think you could put too much fault on the defense. Yeah, for some of those goals you could have, but definitely wasn't 100%. And then when you look back at the offense, which is kind of weird. I went midfield, defense, offense. I should have just gone, in a straight line or from the top to the bottom. But offense, we weren't that clinical that game against Portland. and it was crazy. We had so many chances. Joveljic had chances. Joseph Payne still had a chance before the goal. Peck had some chances. Ricky Puig was trying to find some chances in there. Marco Royce had a couple good chances in there, which by the way, um, I mean, he has to be a little bit more selfish in those situations with Marco Royce. Marco could have had one or two goals in there, maybe one critical one in the end, um, but still though, like I mean, there was a lot of chances that we had, and Portland's defense was on top of it. Man, they were good that night. They definitely just knew how to contain that Galaxy team, and they still got scored on twice, but for the most part, they definitely knew how to contain them that night. And not to say that we weren't stopping or saving a lot of things, because I think for this game it could have been a lot more than 4-2. Like Galaxy had the chances to score three, maybe even four. Portland might have even could have possibly even scored more. They had so many chances as well. John McCarthy definitely had somewhat of a good game, had some saves that night, and yeah, I mean it was unfortunate that we couldn't stop everything. And again, I think Portland that night was the better team. Um, and I think it wasn't something that we wanted to see with the Galaxy and how they were playing, especially the game before, with LAFC. So we didn't want to, we weren't hoping for that result, but unfortunately that was the result that we got. And yeah, I mean, it was a midweek game against Portland. And I think, a lot of people again were panicking, and maybe I was panicking a little bit too, because when you looked at the standings, a lot of those teams that played definitely got closer. I think we only had like a 5 point lead at that point, or I believe it was a 5 point lead, or maybe even less. With the second place team, which was RSL at the point. I mean, the only one that went for us was LAFC that night, who tied. So basically, that night was a little bit concerning, but I don't think it was alarm panicking yet for the Galaxy. Now, when you go into Vancouver, which I guess we'll talk about now. Don't want to go too much into Portland. I mean, it was a bad loss. You know what it is. Vancouver, let's talk about that, because that was our most recent game. Already almost a week since we last played that game. Yeah, I mean, Vancouver, I mean, obviously we got 4-2. Home game, still undefeated at home. We got one more home game left, which is going to be massive for the Galaxy. Which again, still though, in terms of this one against Vancouver, definitely the turnaround that we needed. We got the result that we needed at home. Got to go get those results at home. And not only that, but the result around us definitely helped us as well. A lot of teams that, didn't get the results that they wanted, and that helped the Galaxy. RSL, I believe, tied. LAFC lost that night. Obviously, we beat Vancouver, who's a conference opponent. Seattle tied, I believe, as well. So there was a lot of teams that did not get the results that they needed, and that also gave us a cushion for that game. But let's not talk about the outside results yet. Let's just talk about the game. The game, 4-2 again at home. You get a goal by Peck to start it all off for the Galaxy, to make it 1-0. Then you get one early in the game. It was an own goal by Sebastian Berhalter for the Vancouver Whitecaps. I believe Portland gets, or not Portland, excuse me, we're on to Vancouver now. Vancouver finally gets one as well. In that one, which by the way, I will say the goals in this match were very soft for the Galaxy. I think they could have done much better. But Vancouver managed to get one on the Galaxy for that night as well. And then Gabriel Peck gives another goal to which by the way, Gabriel Peck, what a night for him. But then you get a third goal by Joseph Payne still. Then you get one from Ricky Puig very late in the game, and then Vancouver managed to get one more goal late in the game, but at that point it didn't matter. The Galaxy win 4-2 at home. And yeah, I mean, obviously it was a result that we needed at home, and it's something that you wanted to see from the Galaxy, definitely for sure, especially after against Portland. Which, by the way, it's like it is so crazy to think about in terms of the Galaxy this season that a lot of people, kind of conflict themselves or kind of question the Galaxy sometimes whether this team is legit or can they be a competitor, or well, I think we know they can be competitors, but I think it's more like, can they just be a contender for the cup this year? And you look at the Galaxy this year, who haven't had a losing streak at all. this season. I mean, there might have been a winless streak somewhere in there, but they haven't had a losing streak at all. Their biggest losing streak is one, and that's not even a streak, you know. Um, so for the Galaxy, I think it just very much, just in general for that game, and again, it's a bounce back that you needed. And like Maya Yoshida has said like a while ago, good teams don't lose back to back, and clearly, you're seeing that with the Galaxy. The Galaxy go come back from a very disappointing loss in Portland, and they go back home and they get the job done. Now, obviously, Vancouver were resting some of their players because they did have the Canadian Championship later that week, which they ended up winning actually. Yesterday as of recording, so they ended up winning that. Which for Vancouver, maybe you're not thinking about that Galaxy loss. It was worth it. You rested your players, and you end up winning it all for Vancouver. So yeah, it is something so it was worth it for them, right, to rest up all those players. Um, but still, though, in terms of Vancouver that night, yeah, obviously they weren't maybe 100%. But that's the thing, though. Like the Galaxy knew they weren't at 100%. They knew that they weren't going to be, um, they weren't going to be going at 100%, and maybe if they could have squeaked in the win, they could have, but they weren't necessarily going to. They didn't really care about the result as much because they knew what an important game they had later that week. So the Galaxy got the job done, and that's what you need from your good teams, right? Even if it's a team that's not necessarily going to be the best, you still gotta win, beat them. So obviously the Galaxy did end up beating them. History that night as well in terms of the goal scorers, or at least some of them. The Galaxy for the first time, in fact, for the first time in MLS history, um, you have four players who have scored 10 plus goals with that night because of Joseph Painstill, who ended up getting a goal late, the third goal in that game. So you have Peck, who has more than 10 goals. Jovic has more than 10. Ricky has more than 10, and then Joseph Painstill, I believe that was his 10th. So four players with 10 plus goals, man. Like, that's crazy. And I think, there was some history made that night in terms of the Galaxy. And, again, you look at the Galaxy and how they play that day and how your star players were playing. You got to say, well, then, you have the hope. You definitely have the hope, and you definitely have a little bit more confidence in that game. But yeah, I mean, obviously it was a good matchup for the Galaxy, and it was a good result that you needed, and everything you wanted to see from the Galaxy at home, playing against a team like Vancouver. Which, when you look at the lineup for that game, actually, let's talk about that. You look at the lineup once again: John McCarthy in goal, Nicky Yamane, Maya Yoshida, Garces, starting in this game, which was very interesting because I didn't really talk about Jalen Neal in the Portland game, but he definitely did not have a great game in the Portland game. Has been having a rough stretch of games when it comes to Jalen Neal. So I guess it was time to put Garces in there, and then Garces was starting. That's a player who I felt like played, very well. And, me and Alex were talking about, yeah, if you guys remember, just during the season when we got Garces, we were saying, well, when is he going to get in? When is he going to get minutes? When are we going to finally see Garces play? And see what we want to see, because we had high hopes for him. The Galaxy definitely have high hopes because they bought him after the first initial offer was a loan. So you look at that, and then, we were just wondering, Garces could be a very good asset, and definitely in this game you saw it. And it wasn't just this game. I mean, you look at the game when he started against Chivas, he played a very good game that day. He played a good game that day. So it's like this one was one where you saw him, and I believe he was coming off a little bit of an injury from that Chivas game. So it's like this was his first start since then, and he looked good. I mean, he looked good. He's very athletic. A guy, I think it's everything you want from a center back. I mean, his recoveries are very good. Again, athletic. He has the speed. I mean, he's really good. Like, I mean, he plays out well from the back, which is something, that we were talking about once we got him. So it's like he plays very well in terms of that. And yeah, Garces, was one of those players that definitely looked really good on the defense. Which I know I just talked about. I forgot one more player in the defense, which was John Nelson on the left. But in terms of the defense, I think Garces was kind of the standout there. But in terms of the goals that was let in, maybe that wasn't the best night for the defense. But you got to see some good things from there, and especially him, which I think a lot of people are saying that he should be starting from now on. instead of Jalen Neal. I don't know. And there was a lot of, I guess a bit of not controversy, but a bit of topic and conversation that people were saying that maybe Jalen Neal wasn't it or anything like that. And I don't know, because I mean, Goddard just hasn't had that much playing time with the Galaxy. Obviously, with his time, he's been good. So it's like a very different sample size for both players. But I think, when you look at Goddard and you look at Jalen Neal for the future, um, that's going to be something that I think people are going to keep an eye on. But definitely for sure, Goddard deserved the start for this game, and then Jalen Neal, got to sit back in this one on the bench, and which is unfortunate. But he hasn't been playing that well, and maybe it pushes him to be better in the going into the end of the season, into the playoffs, which is another conversation too. Is should he start in the playoffs at this point? Which is I don't know. To me, I don't know. I mean, I think Gaddis looked really good, but I don't know how well is he going to work with Yoshida in the defense, even though he played well in that Vancouver game. So, yeah, obviously good things to see from the defense, for sure. But also some bad things in terms of those goals, when it came to the defense. Let's look at the midfield. You had Marco Royce in this one. You had Edwin Cerrillo, and you had Ricky Puig. So obviously, in terms of the midfield, you were a little bit more offensive in this game. Ricky Puig obviously got to go in this one. Marco Royce had some good chances, was in the build-up. And you had Edwin Cerrillo back in this one, which, by the way, after that Portland game, when you looked at Brugman and his performance, I think a lot of people want Cerrillo more now than ever. And obviously he played in this game, and he looked pretty good in this game as well. I think the midfield looked okay. It is very much more on the offensive side instead of controlling the possession type of style that the Galaxy play. And even then, they still controlled a lot of the possession in this game. But still, though, it's just like very more on the offensive side for the Galaxy in this game, which me and Alex were actually kind of talking about it. After that game, is that lineup was like, might be the lineup to go. It's very offensive. It's very, a squad where we can probably get goals early on, for the team. Or even if you don't, it's a team with a lot of offensive power where it might have teams trouble. I mean, you obviously look at the LFC game where they went up early and then we managed to score 4 goals. I mean, so it is a style and a formation where you definitely get to see a lot more offense. I think the only flaw is that it does make the team a bit vulnerable early on in the games, especially with how the team plays now. The team starts off very slow, and then they just sort of build up into the, to the end of the first half and going into the second half, right? So, but still though, and it is a interesting way that we've been playing recently. I mean, we didn't really see it in Portland because Marco Royce was on the bench, Edwin Cerrillo wasn't available, but seemingly it's a formation that has kind of worked with us and where the players are at. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it is one of those things where, I mean, maybe they can go. This is the lineup going forward. Obviously, we'll see, but it's not a bad lineup for sure. But still, though, in the midfield, still was a good night. Once again, I think the only issue I had was probably Marco Royce, which was, he has to be a little bit more selfish at times, which I don't know. I mean, there were some moments that he had in the Portland game. There were some moments he had in this game where it was just basically like, just take the shot, and it most likely could be a goal. I don't know if it's the fact that maybe he doesn't want to feel like he's above everybody else. Maybe he's like, oh, but I know I'm Marco Royce, but I don't want these guys to think that, oh, just because I'm here, I'm the top dog or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if that's what he's thinking in his mind, or just wants to build more chemistry with his teammates. But there's some moments where it's just like, listen, Marco, we got you here. We know what you're capable of doing. And, we want to see that. Obviously, it's not saying Marco Royce has been playing bad, but there's some chances where you just got to be like, all right, you got to take those chances. We can't be just leaving those chances off from the, off the board or anything like that. So it's just like, maybe that's my only issue. Ricky Puig, obviously, like I said, gets a goal, was involved in a lot of the offensive plays, played a little bit of defense, which is pretty surprising from Ricky Puig. Which is something I think that really, I talk about with the Galaxy is the turnovers. I mean, when there's turnovers, there's not that many players that go back to help the defense, which is why I said in the Portland game, it's like maybe you can't fault a lot on the defense in terms of, how they performed, because there's not that many people who were going back or maybe, put us in bad spots. And, maybe in the Vancouver game, maybe there were some chances where we were put in bad spots, but, definitely we ended up recovering in that game, and definitely Ricky Pooch played a little bit of defense there, which was pretty surprising. Obviously, you had Edwin Rio back, who was, obviously a defensive midfield who was playing a lot better. There was definitely much more of a defensive presence in the midfield, even though it was very much offensive, for the night. But still, though, I think it was a good night for the midfield in terms of that. I think some of those players just, they had a good night. Unfortunately, Marco Royce did get injured in that game or left off the game due to injury. Of course, Vanny mentioned that it was, precautionary, so maybe it's not necessarily as bad as we think it is. It looked like a hamstring. So maybe he plays against Colorado, maybe he doesn't, which I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play against Colorado with the altitude and everything like that. So maybe you don't want to play him in that game, which will, might be a little bit of a handicap for us for that game. But still, though, maybe Marco Royce doesn't fully get injured here. We don't lose him this early on, which hopefully that's not the case. But maybe we'll see him back for the Austin game for sure. Let's go into a little bit of the offense. Obviously, offense had a great night. Joseph Payne still got a goal. Joveljic, got a start. Necessarily wasn't, maybe he didn't get a goal, but definitely was part of that offense and the building of it. And then Gabriel Peck, who was involved in everything in terms of the offense. I mean, it was involved in all the goals. Gets a goal, causes the own goal, gets the assist off of Joseph Payne, and gets an assist for the Ricky Pooch goal. So and which earned him a player of the match day, which was the first Galaxy player to get player of the match day this season, which was very much surprising. Like, I even looked back at it and I was just like, how haven't we gotten one yet? How haven't we gotten a player to represent the Galaxy in player of the match day, right? So it's like, it was very interesting that we haven't got it, but obviously a lot of those were Messi and Suarez and players who just did play good in those weeks. So can't fault everybody for that one. But finally we get one. Better late than never. And yeah, Gabriel Peck just seemingly was the man of the night that day, and is one of the most important players on this team, and definitely one of the most without Gabriel Peck, I mean, man, what is that going to do? But just still, though, it's just like I can't even imagine what we can do if he wasn't there. But Gabriel Peck definitely, I mean, the progression that he's made this season compared to what he was in the beginning of the season to what he is now is unbelievable. And obviously this just goes into Gabriel Peck and saying like, hey, like, it might not be that long that he's in MLS. It might not be that long that he's here. Obviously, we'll see what happens with Gabriel Peck, but Gabriel Peck has been playing. He's been on fire. Definitely was on fire in this game, and yeah, obviously we need a player like Gabriel Peck to really boost this offense and boost the goals in this team, and definitely again, like I said, a historic night for the offense or for the team with having 4 players having 10 plus goals, the first team in MLS to do so. And Gabriel Peck is, the reason why we got to that, with Joseph Payne still getting that goal, which again, Joseph Payne still got 2 goals back to back. So, I don't know if that means he's turning a new leaf with consistency, which is something that we needed to see from Joseph Payne still, which was the consistency. We haven't seen a lot of that, from Joseph Payne still, but getting 2 goals in a row, hey, you know what? Maybe that helps. Who knows? But and maybe that helps him with his form going into the playoffs. So we'll see for sure. But yeah, though, I mean, offensive had a great night. I mean, the team had a great night. This is a win that you needed against Vancouver. 4-2 win. You had a lot of offense. Maybe the defense could have played a little bit better when it came to those 2 goals, but defensively we played good. And yeah, I mean, obviously, the team right now, in terms of that result, though, getting the win, I mean, it definitely helped us a lot in our favor. With a lot of the outside results that happened around the league, you had our tying against Portland, which was a very, I guess it was an entertaining game. I didn't see it, but it was definitely entertaining when you looked at the score and who scored. I mean, RSL was winning, then Portland ties it up. RSL gets the win, or thinks they get the win, and they score late in the game. Portland ties it late in the game, and it's just like, it was crazy. But they ended up tying. That helps the Galaxy. LAFC loses. That helps the Galaxy, especially because LAFC were playing away. Then they were preparing for the U.S. Open Cup, which they ended up winning, unfortunately. But still, though, something that something that helped us in our favor. Seattle tied, I believe, against San Jose. So there was a lot of results that helped us in our way, and then that ended up giving us a cushion again. I think we're 7 points on top of the Western Conference after that, and I think you're 9 points ahead of LAFC, which is important. I'm bringing that up because they do have two games on hand actually, against the Galaxy, so you got to be looking out on that and see how they do in terms of results. But yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of outside results went our way, and we ended up taking advantage of it, and it gives us a little bit of a cushion going into this weekend. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of things we're going to have to look at in terms of the outside results for this weekend, which is, because the Galaxy aren't playing, and a lot of teams will have the same number of matches played now with the Galaxy. So if some of these teams don't get the results that don't get 3 points, or they don't win, or whatever the case may be, that could go a long way for the Galaxy. But obviously, that's something to keep an eye out for this weekend for sure, in terms of outside results. So obviously, we got to keep that look, because we got to keep a lookout for that. The Galaxy are still looking to be first place in the West, and take that spot, in terms of the playoffs, in terms of CONCACAF Champions Cup. Being first in the West is going to be something important for the Galaxy, and that's what they want to do. In terms of where they're at right now. So hopefully, got to keep an eye out on some of those results, and obviously we'll see what happens with those results for sure. But in terms of against the Vancouver game, you definitely got the result you needed. The outside results went for you, and now we just got to look outside looking in terms of this weekend. So yeah, we'll see how that goes for sure. But yeah, it was a good win against Vancouver. Definitely something that you needed. Definitely needed the bounce back after that 4-2 loss against Portland. So winning against Vancouver definitely helped, last week. So yeah, good for the Galaxy and good for them. Let's talk. I guess that's it for the recaps. I mean, I kind of just went all over the place when it came to talking about these games, which I do apologize. It does feel weird because it's like, the Portland game was over a week ago. We're almost getting to a week since the Vancouver game, and they've already won the Canadian Championship. So it's like, it's kind of weird talking about those games now this late. But still, though, I mean, it is what it is. Got to make an episode. It's unfortunate that I made one late, but it is something that you got to, something you got to talk about, right? Can't keep you guys high and dry off of these episodes. So definitely for sure. But still, though, hopefully this helps you guys, throughout the weekend and things like that, talking about these games. And you're going to remember, you're like, oh yeah, I remember when we lost against Portland and I might have been so down. But then after Vancouver, I was so happy. So it's like, I don't know. It's just a little look back to what had happened, and a little bit of a recap of what happened last week. But definitely something that you, but definitely something to talk about for sure, in terms of the Galaxy. But yeah, those were the recaps. Those were the games. Let's go into a little bit of some Galaxy news here. Let's talk about injury news. Like I mentioned, Marco Reus, precautionary. These 10 days are going to help him for sure. So we'll see if he plays back with Colorado or the Austin game. That's something to keep an eye out for, in terms of injuries. Another player that we haven't heard in a while, which was Martin Cáceres. That's a player that we got an update for. Apparently Vanny said that there has been no timetable for him to return, so maybe that is going to be, essentially it's alluding to the fact that he is most likely not going to be coming back this season. Yeah, so update on Martin Cáceres. Obviously he has been out for a while, and it looks like that he's not going to be coming back for the Galaxy, so that is a big blow, or a blow just in general for the team. But I mean, that's why you did get, you have Garces now, you still have Jalen Neal. I mean, I think the center backs will be okay, but in terms of fan favorites, I guess, Martin Cáceres, going out is a big blow. And unfortunately, I think, in my opinion, I think that is going to be the end of, Martin Cáceres with the Galaxy, if I'm going to be completely honest here. So yeah, no more Martin Cáceres for the rest of the season, which is unfortunate for him. Hopefully he recovers well. But I don't know if he comes back after the season. I mean, that has been a question and a topic of conversation. If he does come back, I don't see it, and I think the writing is on the wall for him not to come back. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think he comes back, and it's unfortunate. That's how his time here has to go. But yeah, it's an unfortunate way to end it for sure. But hopefully that he does have a speedy recovery for sure. That's a little bit of player updates. Let's talk about actually coach updates. Yes, that is right. Coach updates. Greg Vanney gets an extension. He gets a 12-month extension, so a year extension because he made it to the playoffs this year. If I believe that's what it was, why he triggered that extension. But he's triggered an extension for his contract. That was part of his contract with the Galaxy. So another big topic of conversation for the Galaxy in the offseason, because we even talked about it too. It's like, do you bring Greg Vanney back after the season? How do people feel about Greg Vanney after this season? Do we want him back? How far does it depend how far he goes this season? So yeah, I mean, obviously it doesn't matter because Greg Vanney will be here for at least another year, which I think is fair. I think after this season, we're in the playoffs. We made it to the playoffs. If we get the first in the West, that's a big plus for Greg Vanney. I think that deserves him to get at least an extension, a year extension, which I think, for me, I'm okay with that. I think for Alex, that'd probably be okay. He'd be okay with that as well. I think a lot of Galaxy fans would be okay with that. I don't know how. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how Galaxy fans would actually feel that he got this extension, but I think it's deserved. He deserves at least another year. Now the big question is, does he get more years after that extension? Do they even make a bigger extension? Does he get another contract with the Galaxy? And I think that's something that we got to look out for. The Galaxy have to decide, because that's something that, does Greg Vanney deserve to be here for more years? Right? Does he deserve to be for 3 more years, for 4 more years? Like, we don't like. It is something that I think that is going to be a topic of conversation in the off season, but at least for now, he's here for 1 more year, which is pretty big news for the Galaxy that you have Greg Vanney here. Greg Vanney, a good coach, in my opinion. Has been a coach that the Galaxy needed. And if you just look at his time here, his first year, unfortunate that they didn't make the playoffs. We're 1 game away. You make the playoffs in 2022. You make it to the Western Conference semifinals. Last year was not a good year, but I mean, when you look at the boycotts, you look at the injuries that we had, it just really wasn't a good year for anybody. And then now you look at this year again in the playoffs, and possibly going into the Western, being first in the Western Conference. So, I mean, Greg Vanney is just like, and I think a lot of people kind of, don't give Vanney too much credit. I mean, I've seen it before where people say, well, it's the talent around him. It's the talent that gets him into these places and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, well, sure, the talent might save Vanney at moments, but I mean, Vanney still has to manage all those talents. It's not easy to manage a lot of those talents. It's not because everybody has a different personality, different egos, different lifestyles. It's just like you have to manage, not only what's on the field, but also what's off the field, right? So it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously you gotta manage all of that, and I think Greg Vanney has done a good job with that. In terms of, with the Galaxy, even last year when it wasn't seemingly that good of a year, I think even the guys, a lot of the players still rallied around Greg Vanney. So it's like, I think the players still, appreciate Vanney. They like what he has to offer, and yeah, I mean, obviously deserves that year extension no matter what happens after this, after the playoffs. But definitely for sure, it's something that, I think what the next question is how many more years would be added on to that, or if he is going to get more years after that. So I think that is going to be the big conversation after this year. So it is a big decision. It is a big decision to make to appoint the guy who's basically going to, take the keys to the wheel, be the driver of the Galaxy bus. I don't know what I was going with there, but definitely for sure, Greg Vanney. I think I think for now he deserves that extension, and then after that, we'll see what we get out of him. I think that's going to be, we'll see how much he gets added on after that. But yeah, definitely for sure, we'll see how it goes. And in terms of contracts too, it's like you get new contracts by what you've done, not what you're going to do, right? And I think Greg Vanney has done a good amount for this team, in this time with the Galaxy. He's had some moments where we've questioned him, but definitely has had a lot of moments where he's, we've been in support of. So, Greg Vanney definitely is no slouch when it comes to coaching. So, he gets an extension. So that's another update in the Galaxy news area. I'm trying to think of any more news. Dignity Health Sports Park will be a venue for the Gold Cup. That's something that was announced yesterday, I believe. So, although it's not Galaxy related, I mean it is Galaxy related because it's Dignity Health Sports Park. But Gold it will be a venue for the Gold Cup. So that's another piece of news that came out. Um, and yeah, I think that's it for the Galaxy news. Ventura County updates. I actually don't know when they played. I know they played a midweek game as well. I think we covered when they played Portland Timbers too. So it's like, um, let's see, who did they play? That was their last game. Their last game was the Portland Timbers too. So I did actually, we did cover that. So damn, I didn't even realize Ventura County hasn't played since then. But still though, Ventura County, I guess, is still playing and they're still doing their thing. So that was a little bit of an update for Ventura County. So yeah, I think that's it for the news and the updates. Let's talk about, I guess, previewing the. There's 3 games left in the season. So next week you're gonna have a double week game. You're gonna have Colorado. You're gonna have Austin. And then I think after that you have another break. I forget. I mean, the schedule. There's been a lot of breaks for the Galaxy for sure, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, you look at it both ways. You can look at it as, hey, they're going to be very well rested, but you could also look at it as like, hey, you at this point you don't want to take breaks. You got to just kind of put the gas, gas on the pedal, or put your foot on the pedal. So yeah. So next week you're gonna have Colorado, at Colorado. Then you're gonna have Austin at home. The Galaxy take a week break. Then they have the Houston Dynamo on October 19th. But I guess I'll preview just a little bit of the upcoming games. Obviously, for Colorado is going to be interesting, because it could be a game where I think the Galaxy have to go and get a win. Because when you look at the rest of the schedule, and I think the main one is just Houston, right? You look at Houston for the final game, and we know how Houston on decision day has been for us. It has not been good for us at all in terms of the Galaxy, right? So, so now you look at these 2 games, you look at Colorado, you look at Austin. Austin has to be a win. 100% has to be a win at home. You have to end off the home game with points, with the win. But the Colorado one's going to be very interesting because now you have to look at it and say, well, if we can get a win here and then you manage to get a win at home against Austin, then you don't have to really worry much about Houston, right? So, I think that is something that the Galaxy are going to have to look at here. And I think Colorado is going to be more important than we think it is. It's going to be much more important than how we think it is, when it comes to that game. So I think the Galaxy are going to try their best in Colorado. Obviously, it's not an easy place to go play. You're in altitude. Colorado has been sneakily good. Has been a sneaky good team this season. And I believe Colorado was also looking for home field advantage. Would be big for them if they get home field advantage with the altitude. So it's like, for Colorado, it is something that's going to be important for both teams. They're both going to be playing for something there, right? So, for Colorado, it's going to be a very important game. It might be a game where you might not necessarily go all out, but definitely have to go try to get the win out there. And try to get 3 points, because again, if you get a win there, if you get a win against Austin at home, if you get results in those 2 games, then Houston doesn't become that much of a challenging, game to play, because maybe you already lock up the number 1 spot, and then you, what's it called? And then you don't have to worry about Houston as much. Now, obviously, if the Galaxy can win out in these next 3 games, I think that'd be perfect for them. In terms of trying to seal up the number 1 spot in the Western Conference, right? So if they win out, they don't gotta worry about anything, right? But still, though, I think if you, if they win these next 2 games, and depending how other results happen, it can do wonders for the Galaxy, and then you don't have to worry too much about Houston and how that might affect how might that affect the Galaxy going into the playoffs, right? So, so I think Colorado is going to be much more important than how we think it is, going into that game on Wednesday. But it is going to be a tough one. It is going to be a tough one against Colorado in that sort of altitude, playing through that. And again, no Marco Royce possibly in that game, but you're going to have most of your lineup available. So I think that is going to be good for them. But if the Galaxy can get a result against Colorado and then heading into, back home into Austin, and they get a result there, I think that's going to do a lot of wonders there for the Galaxy for sure. But definitely something to keep an eye out. I've been saying that a lot in this episode. You got to keep an eye out on everything when it comes to the Galaxy, right? But still, though, it is something to, that we hope we can see for the Galaxy, and something that we need to see for the, to lock up that Western Conference spot, because at this point we are playing for home field advantage. We are playing to, hopefully get the playoffs to run through Dignity Health Sports Park. And if you do, with how we've been playing at home, that's going to be a massive advantage for the Galaxy. Speaking of home field advantages, the Galaxy can actually clinch home field advantage in the playoffs for the Audi MLS Cup playoffs if Salt Lake lose/draw against Austin, and Vancouver loses or draws against Portland, and Seattle draws against Houston. The second scenario is Houston loses at Seattle, and Salt Lake lose or draw at Austin, and Vancouver lose or draw at Portland, and Colorado lose or draw at Minnesota. So there are some home field, clinching scenarios for this weekend, even though we're not playing. In all seriousness, though, I mean, I think, that shouldn't matter. We should be just playing our own games at this point. Plus, that's a lot of things to happen for it to for us to actually clinch home field advantage for the playoffs. So, to me, I don't think we should worry about that too much yet. But I think still, though, focusing on the results and points is what's going to really, it's really the one that you got to look out for this weekend. But definitely for sure. In terms of the games you got to be looking for, you got to look at RSL's game. You got to look at LAFC's game. How are they going to play after winning the U.S. Open Cup? And even then, if I was going to make an episode, if I had made an episode before the U.S. Open Cup final, I was going to say the same thing. It's like, how does LAFC respond after whether they win or lose the cup? How do they bounce back for that or respond after that? Because it is kind of difficult for LAFC knowing that they won, and then now they got to go play a game, and I believe they play away. I don't exactly remember who they play, but still, though, how do they respond after that? And it could be a booster for them, or is this going to be a game where they kind of slip because they've been, in the championship, a little bit of a championship hangover, right? So that's another game you got to look out for. You got to look at Seattle, Portland, Vancouver, of course, Colorado. You got to look at all those teams and who they're playing against, and see how the standings shape up after this weekend, because it could do a lot of things for the Galaxy, and it could possibly not do a lot of things. But at least I know for sure we do have a little bit of a cushion, so that does help. But I think the main one you got to look out for is RSL and LAFC, to see how they do in their games, and how that their position in the standings for sure. Which, yeah, I mean, for LAFC, though, I mean, they ended up winning the U.S. Open Cup, which, a lot of people were even saying, like, obviously nobody's happy that LAFC won a title, but they ended up winning a title, calling it a Mickey Mouse title because of how the U.S. Open Cup has been this season, which, by the way, I will say my stance on that is that it definitely devalued the U.S. Open Cup. I mean, obviously LAFC won it. They won it in the circumstances that was played. So there's no fault for them for playing in under what they, in those circumstances. And even then, it's like, it's not their fault that they had to win in those circumstances. It's not Kansas City's fault that they won in those circumstances, but it's really just the way MLS treated the U.S. Open Cup this year was not good. And it really did devalue the U.S. Open Cup, which is, our most, some might argue one of the most prestigious trophies in the U.S., right? I mean, it's been around for 109 years. So, it's definitely something that it did get devalued. I mean, obviously LAFC played their games that they needed to play, but when you don't have everybody playing, when it's called the U.S. Open Cup and you don't have everybody in it, it's just like, why is it called an Open Cup? It's not an Open Cup if not everybody played it. But again, that's not LAFC's fault. In fact, it's not even U.S. Soccer's fault. It's really just MLS and how Don Garber just really decided to focus on the Leagues Cup instead of the Open Cup. And I mean, it's just not something. It sucks. It really does suck. But call it a Mickey Mouse Trophy for LAFC. I mean, yeah, definitely devalued for sure. For them, it's not something that. I mean, they're going to be proud of it. They won it. and it's unfortunate that they won a trophy, but still, though, it is something that it is a little bit devalued. But that's just my thoughts about the U.S. Open Cup. Yeah, because I mean, call it Mickey Mouse if you want to call it Mickey Mouse, you can, but it definitely got devalued for sure. I mean, when you look at just how the U.S. Open Cup normally is, and then what they did this year, it's just like, yeah, definitely devalued. Devalued one of our most historic tournaments. I mean, really, just like I said when that news got announced, Don Garber really spat in the face of U.S. soccer, which is, it is what it is, I guess. But anyways, that was enough LAFC talk, because we are a Galaxy podcast. Why am I even talking about them? They won, whatever's. But still, though, you still got to look at them and how they do the results. Well, I guess that's why we're talking about them, right? We got to see how they do this weekend. So yeah, they're one of the teams that you got to look out for. RSL as well. I mean, there's a lot of games that you guys could look out for, but for us, we don't have a game. We don't play till Wednesday, so yeah, just keep your eyes out on everything and see how everything goes. So we get a break from the Galaxy. We don't have to stress out about the Galaxy too much right now or anything like that. We can't be disappointed if they lose. Sure, we might not be happy that if they win, but we don't have to deal with it, right? Our emotions will be, it's a nice little break, I guess, right? So, enjoy the other games. Look out for the other games that could affect the Galaxy. But, yeah, I mean, definitely for sure. Going to be a chill weekend for everybody in Galaxy Land, right? Yeah, gonna be a chill weekend, Go watch some other games. Go watch other sports. I know I am. I'm gonna be going to Santa Clara over the weekend. Going to go watch the Patriots take on the 49ers this weekend, which is gonna be fun. Because I am a Patriots fan. They're both 1-2 right now, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know there's probably some San Francisco 49er fans in here, maybe. But yeah, I mean, hopefully it's a good game when I go up there. But definitely for sure, do what you need to do this weekend, and hopefully y'all take care of yourselves. With that being said, I think that's going to be it for the episode. Can't thank you guys enough for watching and listening. You can follow me at Insider Galaxy on Instagram, on Twitter, or X, actually. Go follow LA Galaxy Central on Instagram. Hopefully y'all have a good weekend, like I said. Stay safe out there. Be good out there. Do what you need to do. If you're going to watch the other games, watch the other games. If you're going to go do something else, go do something else. It's fine to go do something else when the Galaxy aren't playing, right? So, yeah, obviously, hopefully y'all have a great weekend. Hopefully y'all have a good time or whatever you guys do over this weekend. Be a friend. Tell a friend about the podcast, whenever you're listening to the podcast. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day, rest of your night, and a good weekend. Yeah, we'll be back here. The Galaxy play again on Wednesday against the Colorado Rapids at Colorado. Yeah, so, we got a little bit of time before that game. But anyways, thank you guys, and G's out.
7 words